Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Zayin. Today's daf is sponsored by Helen Danzig in loving memory of her Aunt Doris, remembering my aunt who passed away yesterday. May her neshama have an aliyah. We're going to get started with the middle of our Mishnah. We started our Mishnah and we saw that the Sanhedrin, which Rashi points out, even the Sanhedrin of 23, obviously the Sanhedrin of 71, is in a semicircle formation. We talked about how many of the Dayanim, how many Sofrim were there writing down what the judges said. I'll just break for one quick minute because I forgot to mention in class, Shuli Mishkan's, we talked yesterday about Chizkiah and all the great people, and Chizkiah and Shebna. So the flashback yesterday was about that. Also, Gefet was about the mitzvah and the balancing of different mitzvot. So that I'm not sure if it went up yet. It will go up today, if not, if it hasn't gone up yet. So about the balancing of mitzvot, very interesting idea, right? Title is there 1 + 1? Do you get a deal? What's the really in the weight of all the different mitzvot? How do they weigh up against each other? So back to our Mishnah, we have the Sanhedrin in this formation, and now we're going to talk about what about the students. The students who sat facing the Sanhedrin, and we'll see in a minute what they were doing there. So there's 3 rows of Talmidei Chachamim that stand before them. Right? We have the famous story of the, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan Rav Kana when he comes to town, and then he gets kicked back to the back row, and they keep kicking him back, and then they bring him forward. Right, the rows were very significant in terms of who sits where and what that shows about who you are. Okay, the closer you are to the judges, the more prominent you are. And we're going to see very specifically they ranked people. Okay, it sounds like at the army they're always ranking, like who's here, what's where. Well, people were very much ranked here as well. So everybody knows their seat. Everybody knows where they are, where they stand compared to everybody else. Let's say one of the judges retires, okay, or dies or something like that. So what happens? So we go to the row of the students, and the first one, probably on the right-hand side, was the one who goes. Then what happens? So when we go to fill in a spot in the court, and that seems to be why the students are there, besides we saw also the students could say things, but also they're kind of in waiting. If something happens to one of the judges, maybe even if someone's sick, so they bring someone else in. It's not clear if it's temporarily they would bring someone in or it's only when it's a permanent position. Then what happens? So they take from the first. And then everybody moves seats. Okay, so it's like musical chairs, right? This one moves over there, and then everybody moves into the other spot. And you're going to move everyone from each of the 3 rows, basically. Everyone's going to move one to the right, and then the one for the end of the second line is going to move to the first and the second line is going to move to be the end of the first row. And same thing. Someone from the 3rd row is going to come to the 2nd row. What about the empty seat now in the 3rd row? Well, then there's behind those people, there's just regular people who are, I guess, waiting to be sitting here. Also Talmidei Chachamim, and they take someone from the people and they put them in the shli. Now, when they put them in the 3rd row, remember, they don't put them in the first seat, they put them in the last seat. Okay, so again, you just imagine, everybody moving over and filling in the space next to them, and then in comes this new person. Now we want to know, back to the beginning of the Mishnah, how do we get that the court is a semicircle? And from here, we're going to get off on a total tangent because we are going to start with the drasha, but we're going to take a drasha, we're going to take a pasuk from Shir haShirim, and we're going to extrapolate all the different parts of the pasukim and learn all different things. It's a song, it's a pasuk from Shir haShirim, for the Song of Songs, and it's used as a praising of the Sanhedrin and perhaps even also of the Jewish people. So Amar Rabbi Acha bar Chanina da Amar Kra Shrarech Agan Hasahal. Your navel is like a round goblet. Al Yachsar Hamazig. Let no mingled wine be missing. So we actually saw this pasuk before. Okay, we're going to read later. We'll read the rest of the pasuk. Shrarech zo Sanhedrin. The Shrarech, the navel, is Sanhedrin. Okay, the navel is the Sanhedrin. Why is that? So first of all, it sounds like Srara, even though it's with a shin, but if you switch the dot, it becomes a sin in Srara's place of authority. But also they're going to say, why they call it sharech, the navel? Because the Sanhedrin, and here we seem to be talking about the Great Sanhedrin, sits in the center of the world, right? The way they viewed it, the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, is positioned in the center of the world. Okay, whether physically or maybe just it means this is the center, the most important place in the world. Agan, why the word Agan? Well, Shihim Megena al Kol Olam Kulo. Okay, they take this out of context, and what they're saying it to mean is Milashon Hagana, to protect. It protects the entire world. And here we see how, right, justice protects, and this is protecting the entire world. Hasahal, here we finally get to why we're here. Sal Shihi Domel Sahal, because the way they sat was like the moon. The Sahar is the moon. Now, why half circle? Well, the moon is often not full. So they say it's like an incomplete circle, and you take an incomplete circle, you're going to shape it like a half circle. Al yichsar hamazek, shemutzrach echad mehem latzet ro'in. Okay, what does this have to do with mazeg and diluted wine? What was wine? It was diluted. Okay, so now they're going to say, Im hutzrach, and this we learned already. Im hutzrach echad mehem latzet. If one of them wants to leave in the middle of the something going on, or in general, they always had to have people there. How many people always had to be there? Remember the Beit Din, the Great Sanhedrin? As long as there's 23 people, you can leave. Sometimes you have schools where you have to have a bathroom pass and you can't let more than one person leave at a time. So here there has to be a minimum always of, right, bit of a different issue. Minimum amount of people. What is that? 23. How'd they get to 23? Because mazig is diluted. So they say, oh, a third. It's a third. Again, there was different ways of diluting wine. They understand this to be a ratio of 1 to 3. So you have to have at least a third of the people there. If not, you can't leave. Continuation of the pasuk. Bitnei aremat chitim. Your stomach is a pile of wheat. Ma aremat chitim. Okay, why is that a nice thing? Well, ma aremat chitim akol nehenim mimenu. Right? I don't know if I want this compliment, but just like an aremat chitim, a pile of wheat, everybody enjoys. Remember, in those days, every meal had bread. That's why hamotzi is on bread, and that's the main meal. All the meals were with bread. Likewise, the Sanhedrin, everybody enjoys, just like everyone enjoys bread and has it at every meal, everybody enjoys the listening to the reasoning of the Sanhedrin. It's like a beautiful thing to hear the logic and what reasons they came up with. Suga b'shoshanim. Okay, end of that pasuk is Suga b'shoshanim. It's hedged with roses. Shafilu kisuga shel shoshanim lo yifritzu bahem pratzot. This is a praising of the Jewish people that even like a hedge of even if there's the fence is like a hedge of roses, which is pretty easy to breach, right? It's much better than like a brick wall. Lo yifritzu bahem pratzot. They will not breach that wall. Okay, and this is going into a praise of the Jewish people that they don't breach. They don't breach. They keep the mitzvot very well, even though there's not too many barriers put up, which is actually interesting because we're always talking the opposite, how we have to put up gederot and we have to put boundaries and we have to protect the mitzvot. This is really saying we don't even really need those boundaries. And this is what a mean said to Rav Kahana, and here we're going to see an example of it, which will explain to you why. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but A Hedge of Roses of Rabbi Lamb, it was one of the first modern books written about Taran Mishpacha in a day when people didn't talk about it so much. You'll see exactly why it's called A Hedge of Roses based on this Gemara. So this heretic comes to Rav Kahana. We're going to get into a whole bunch of questions of heretics in the next 2 pages. I think it already starts on tomorrow's daf. So this heretic says to Rav Kahana, they say the nida shari li chude b'hade gavra, a woman who's in nida, even though it's an isur karet to sleep with your husband when you're in nida, well, she can, right, be with her husband alone in a room. So efshar esh ben ored ve'enamav hevet, you could have fire with as you call it, ored. Someone help me with the translation, but with like twigs, and it's not going to go on fire. So Amar Le, okay, you could call it fiber chips, okay, something like that, but something that can kindle very easily. and it doesn't, right? You can imagine a couple, right? There's a lot of fire and passion between them, and you're allowed to be together in a room alone with nobody else there when it's forbidden, Isur Kare, to be together. So, and yet, what do we say? Amarle, so that was what the heretic said to Rav Kahana, like, what kind of crazy Torah do you have? To which Rav Kahana answers, HaTorah ida aleinu sugaba shoshanim, shafilu kesugaba shoshanim lo yifritzu b'hem pratzot. Say the Jewish people are so strong that that's not an issue for them at all. Rish Lakish Amar Mehacha, he says, I learned it from a different pasuk, and you're going to see it's not exactly the same thing. Kepelach harimon rakatech. Okay, it's another pasuk from Shir haShirim. Your temples are like a slice of pomegranate. Afilu, another compliment I'm not sure that I'd be looking for, but afilu rekanim shabach maleim mitzvot kirimon. They darshan the word rakateh, which is temples, as rekanim. Even the empty ones among you, even the Jews that don't really keep mitzvot, still keep a ton of mitzvot. And this is more not just saying, praising the Jewish people that they don't go past small fences and protection, so they don't need a lot of protection to prevent them from sinning. This is saying even people who sin also do a lot of good things and are full of mitzvot. And this is kind of saying that, appreciate the wide range of Jewish people and all different kinds of people that there are. Even the Rekanim, who you might think are Rekanim, but they're not really. Rabbi Zera Amar Mehacha, he learns the same thing as Rabbi Lakish, but from a different pasuk. Vayarach ereach b'gadav. This is when Yaakov pretends to be Esav, and he goes to Yitzchak to get the blessing, and it says that Yitzchak smelled the smell of his clothes. Al tikrei b'gadav ela bogdav. Okay, and this is saying basically even the bogdav, even those who rebel against God, still have a beautiful smell. And again, it's saying even bad people within the Jewish people are not even so bad. Hanu Yoni. Now we're going to have a story about some bad people among the Jewish people. And I assume they're saying this to say something positive, but I wanted to raise an issue at the end, and I want you to think about this story and what maybe this reflects about Rabbi Zera. So there were Biryone, okay, thugs or ruffians, okay, people who were, now here I want to point out, bad people doesn't necessarily mean they're not Shomrei Halacha, okay, right? Bad people here are people who are doing evil things, okay? They're people who are ruffians, they're beating people up, they're robbing people. So there were these ruffians in the Shivavute to Rabbi Zera, in the neighborhood of Rabbi Zera, to have a makarev lehu. He tried to befriend them. He wanted to get them to become good people. He wanted to get them to be choser b'tshuva. Okay, he said, I have faith in these bad guys. I think we can turn them around and have them be good people. Rabbanan, the rabbis didn't agree with his approach. They said this is not the way to do it. We'll see soon what he did, okay? And then we can talk about whether it was good or not. Kinach nafshei de Rabbi Zera, when he died, Amre, these guys said, Anta idna havachariche katin shake, the guy who has, the short guy who has singed feet, okay, you might remember Rabbi Zera, he was short, and when he goes to Israel in Bava Metzia, Daf Pei Hey, it talks about him, it says he sat 100 fasts because he wanted to forget the Babylonian Torah. So when he got to Israel, he would know, like he would be able to learn the Torah in Israel. And, it's like a different approach. So he wanted to forget everything he learned. Kind of fascinating. The second series of 100 fasts he did, I'm just pulling out the Gemara so I remember, right, was that also fascinating, that Rabbi Elazar wouldn't die in his time so that he wouldn't have to be the leader. He didn't want to be responsible for everyone. Didn't want that responsibility on him. And the third thing was he didn't want the fire of Gehenna, of hell, to get to him. So what would he do? Every month he would check himself and he would go into an oven and nothing would happen to him. But one day the rabbis were upset with him about something. And when he went into the oven, he got singed and his thighs were singed. So he became called the guy with the singed thighs who's short because he was short. Okay, so anyway, that was just a long thing to explain that one phrase about him. But they said, and now we're going to learn what he did. And I want to, before we even read the second part, I want you to think about it. Until that point, they said, until he died, this short guy with the singed feet, Dava Bayalam Rachame, he would pray for mercy for us. Okay, so now you see what was going on this whole time. How was he trying to get them to do tshuva? He would pray for mercy for them. What would happen, right? These ruffians would do all these terrible things, and then Rabbi Zera would pray for them, and everything would be okay, right? It sounds kind of similar to where we have people who go to the rabbi for blessings and think they could do whatever they want, and then go to the rabbi and get blessed and everything will be fine and the rabbi will kind of take care of them. And it's this idea that often people are critical of it. So I want you to think about this story and whether this is a good thing or not a good thing. So what happens? So they say now that he's dead, he used to pray for mercy for us. Who's going to do this for us? Here, so they end up doing tshuva. Now, all his life, he was trying to get them to do tshuva, and they didn't. But once he died and they realized his loss, that they didn't have anyone anymore to take care of them, they decided, okay, now we have to do tshuva. So I want to just ask you and think about, do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, what he did? Because on the one hand, let's say it's great, because in the end, they did tshuva. On the other hand, if someone else had continued in his way, then they wouldn't have done tshuva either, right? Because they were just relying on him. So he created a situation where they totally relied on him and felt like we don't have to do anything. On the other hand, in his absence, they realized his loss and then they actually did do tshuva. So it's a little of a deliberation, because if other rabbis had agreed with Rabbi Zera and had continued doing this, then they never would have done tshuva, because it's almost like with children, if you do everything for them, they don't learn how to do it themselves, so you have to create independence. So he wasn't really creating independence. He created dependence on him and a feeling that they didn't really have to do tshuva, on the other hand, when he was gone. So anyway, it raises a bit of a question here. Shalosh shurot. Okay, so that was all. I just want to remind you how we got here. The whole reason we got here was all about this one pasuk of the Sahar. Okay, we got there for the one word in that pasuk, the Sahar, which taught us about the Sanhedrin. Needed to be round and a semicircle, even though it wasn't clear from the pasuk exactly it was a semicircle, but at least round and like the moon. And from there we got to the semicircle. From that we brought this entire pasuk that talked about the value of the Sanhedrin and the greatness of the Jewish people. Okay, so we had those two elements in the pasuk. Shalosh shurot. Now we're back to these 3 rows. And Rabbi is not going to add too much more because we kind of understood this. But Amar Rabbi Shma mina ki naide kulu naide. Okay, you can see from the Mishnah, and maybe it's just going to lead him to his next question, which is everybody moved, right? One person moved, it basically caused everybody to move. V'leimalahu, but why doesn't the person who's, let's say, at the beginning of the second row, who now is to become the last person in the first row, could say, I was at the front of the row. Now you're sticking me in the zanav and the tail. You're sticking me at the very end of the first row. Well, Amar Abai de Amar lehachi have zanav la'arayot ba'alti rosh l'shualim. Right, very famous from Pirkei Avot. Better to be the tail of the lion than to be the head of the foxes. Okay, and basically saying that better obviously to be the end of the first row than the head of the second row. New Mishnah. Ketzad ma'aymin et ha'idim alei nefashot. If you might remember, we had what's the iyum? What do you threaten the witnesses when they come in Dina Mamonot? Remember, we had 3 different opinions. We started with, there'll be no rain. And then we said, well, maybe he doesn't care about the rain. Maybe he's an uman. And then they said this, and then they said that. Okay, basically, we had one sentence that they would say, and there was a little of a deliberation about what they would say. But when it comes to the Eidei Nefashot, it's very detailed. They would bring them into a room, apparently, or something, and then they would threaten them. They would say the following. You might say from circumstantial evidence. You might not have real evidence. You might be just saying, we know this person killed because there was circumstantial evidence. We'll get in the Gemara what exactly is circumstantial evidence. Or mishmuar, you heard that this person killed from someone else. Aid mipi aid, either you heard from another witness, umipi adam ne'aman, you heard from somebody who was very reliable, which obviously none of these things are accepted. Right? Maybe you're lying and you don't know that we're going to grill you and we're going to find out if you have a lie. We're going to ask you lots and lots of questions to figure out if there's inconsistencies. Okay, so first they're telling them all the ways that you can't testify this way, you can't testify that way, and if you're lying, we'll catch you. And now they say, and just think about, even if we don't catch you, think about the ramifications of your actions. Dine nefasho, capital punishment, is not like monetary punishment. Dine mamonot, adam note mamon, umit kaperlo. If you make somebody pay and it was a lie, and you want to do tshuva and you feel bad, or you get caught, it's fine. You'll pay back the money and nothing, right? There's nothing irreversible about it. Anything can be fixed. However, when it comes to dinei nefashot, as we know, dinei nefashot damo v'dam zarotav tluyin bo ad saf ha'olam. It is totally final. And not only that, but the blood of the person and their future children or lack thereof, because if you kill this person, they won't have children. Perhaps you could also say it affects other people. It affects their children, right? We all know if somebody dies in the family, it affects everybody else. So you're not just affecting one person, you're affecting lots of other people and forever, okay? And you're basically stopping other people from coming into this world. Shekem matzinu b'Kayin. And from here, we're going to get to Cain and Abel. So we saw Shekayin sharag et achiv when Cain killed Abel, Cain killed Hevel, shene'emar, kol dimei achicha tzoakim. Right? What does God say to Cain? The sounds of the blood of your brother, but it said the bloods of your brother. What bloods in plural? Well, it must be eno omer dam achicha ela dimei achicha. Why is it in plural? Damo v'dam zarotav. It's his blood and the blood of his children. Okay, davar acher. Okay, now that is, we're stopping now, presumably at least. There's different opinions about this. There's actually a lot of different opinions about some of these lines in the Mishnah, whether some of them are tangents that the Mishnah goes off on, because we're talking about Cain and Hevel and how to dart in that pasuk. Now we're going to bring a different drasha on that pasuk, and now we're leaving the threats that they would say in the quote of what they would tell the witnesses. Some people think this is part of the threats, and we're going to have the same problem a bit later on. The blood of your brother, blood's plural because the blood was all over the place. Okay, it was on trees, it was on stones, the blood went splattering everywhere. Later we'll see perhaps another drashan showing why the blood splattered everywhere. Kind of how Cain murdered Hevel. But we'll get back there much later. Lefichach nivra adam yechidi. Okay, so now it seems we're back to the threats to the witnesses, the words we say to the witnesses. Therefore, the humans were created, Adam Rishon was created by himself, just one person. Why is that? The reason why God didn't create a bunch of people all at once, but created one person, was because we wanted to say that anyone who's ma'abed nefesh echad, anyone who takes a life of one person, and this is what they're telling the witnesses, don't kill this person, this is the value of life, it's as if he destroyed an entire world. And if you keep someone alive, right, save someone's life, it's as if you created and you kept the entire world alive. That's all. This is a very famous line, all about the value of life, and it's an important thing to tell the witnesses before they're about to testify about someone who's going to get killed. Okay, another reason. Now, it seems again we're going off topic, which is another reason, Shenivra Adam Yechidi, why was Adam Rishon created by himself, only one person, because of Shlom HaBriot, okay, to make peace between people. Shelo Yomar Adam L'Chaviro Abba Gadol Me'avicha. Interesting way to say it. Instead of I'm greater than you, they say my father's greater than your father, okay? But you can't say that because everyone we're all descended from Adam Rishon. So no one can claim I'm any greater than anybody else. Of course, people do try to claim that, but there's really no basis for it. This is a topic we're going to come back to later also, so that the Gentiles don't say to the Jews, oh, look, there's more than one God in the world, right? Because look, there were many humans created. Each one was created by a different God. If only one was created, it must be there's only one God. And also to show the greatness of God. If you make a coin, right? So you have one mold and you make, right? All the coins look exactly the same. Okay, but God made everyone in the image of the first man, and but no one is, right? We're all completely different from another, right? Even with genetics, right? Each person is an individual, and that shows the greatness of God. Now, again, this next sentence, it's not sure if we're still on this tangent, and it has to do with the last sentence about everyone being unique and individual, or perhaps we're going back to think about the value of life and don't testify if you're going to testify falsely because of the value of life. So some people think it's part of we're going back to the quote of what they're telling the witnesses. Some people think this is just connected to the last line. Lifichach, therefore. So the question is, what's the therefore referring to? Okay, so either because we value individuals' life, as we said before, everyone's life is important, and therefore everyone needs to say the world was created for me and see your purpose in life, and kind of telling the witness, like, you have a purpose here and don't mess it up, or, do it right, which could be also a lead into the next thing. Or perhaps it's just saying about if each one of us is created individually, even though, right, we're all coming from the same person, we're all descended from Adam Rishon, but we're each different. That means everyone has to view yourselves as if the world was created for me only, or not only as if there's no one else, but meaning I have a purpose in this world. V'shema tomru, and maybe you'll say, Ma lanu v'letzarazo. Now, until now, we've been warning the witness about not lying, not saying testimony that you didn't see yourself, that you heard, all that. Now we're switching to, what if you are coming to testify truthfully, but you're a little nervous about it and you don't want to? Either you don't want to bother, or you're worried about, I'm actually going to cause someone's death. So this comes to encourage someone who's a little nervous about testifying. Why should I bother with this, right? I'll just keep my mouth shut. Ooh, it's easier for me, right? I don't have to start. Why am I getting involved in this? Okay, now at the top of Amud Bet. What do you mean? The Torah says, again, this is what they're telling the witnesses. Right? And he's a witness. Either, right, you saw something or you know something. If you don't say it, no, you're going to get punished. Maybe you'll say, look, I don't want to be responsible for the death of somebody, right? If I testify, I'm going to cause this person to be killed. And not only that, some people say this is a source for the fact, there's a machloket about this, whether the witnesses are the ones who implement the death penalty. Some people say that the witnesses implement the death penalty. They're the ones who are involved in killing the person, which is fascinating, and it makes sense almost, because if you're going to testify and you're going to actually have to kill them, we want to make sure you're telling the truth. On the other hand, that could really scare you, as we see here. Well, there's a pasuk that says in Mishlei that when the wicked people are destroyed from the world, there's happiness, there's rejoicing. This is a good thing. It's important to get rid of evil people, especially if they're murderers, right? They can be dangerous. So, ba'avod risha'im rina. Okay? It's important to bring them to justice. So again, we saw the two sides of worry that the person might testify falsely, and on the flip side, also saying how important it is to put evil people and bring them to justice, and therefore don't be nervous or hesitant, because this is very important. So if you do have truthful testimony, bring it forward. So now the Gemara is going to get off into what is circumstantial evidence. Tanu Rabbanan, Ketzad me'omek, Omer lahen, Shema kach ri'item, sheratz achar chavero lechurba. So they say to him, maybe this is what you saw? Maybe you saw, sheratz achar chavero lechurba. Someone was chasing someone else into a deserted place. Where churba is a destroyed area, but whatever, kind of, there's nobody really there. V'ratztem acharav, and you chased, in other words, you see someone chasing someone else, and then you chase them. Umatzatim saif biyado, and then when you get there and you catch up to them, you see a sword in the person's hand. V'damo mataftef, and there's blood dripping off the sword. V'haruch mefarper, and the dead person is kind of convulsing, right? Almost not even fully dead. Im kachri item lo item klum, and it's quite obvious that this person is dead and was killed by that person, but you didn't see it. You didn't see the actual murder, so you didn't see anything. That's called circumstantial evidence. And this, by the way, if we have a range of circumstantial evidence, this would be a range where it's pretty clear what happened here. And yet, since you didn't see it, you cannot testify about it. And in fact, there's a braita that exactly brings us a case like this. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Shatach. Shimon ben Shatach said, im lo re'iti echad. Okay, this is a language of swearing, of an oath, saying really what it means is I won't see the nechama, I won't see, the glory of Israel brought back if I'm lying. Okay, now, im lo re'iti, if I didn't see the following thing, meaning I swear I saw this. What did he say? He saw exactly what we just described. Echad sheratz achar chavero lechurban, v'ratzti acharav, so someone was chasing someone else, and I ran after them. V'ra'iti saif biyado, when I got there, I saw a sword in his hand, v'damo metaftef, the blood was dripping, harug b'farper, the body was convulsing, v'amarti lo rasha mi harago lezeh, o ani o ata. And what does Shimon ben Shatach say? Now it's you and me and the dead body. If somebody comes and sees us, they're going to think it's either you or it's me. And we know it's not me. We know it's you. But I don't have evidence. But I can't bring your death. Why? We need two witnesses. And also, besides, we need two witnesses, right? This is circumstantial evidence. But God, who knows machshavot, God knows everything that's going on, will punish this person. Well, what happened? Amru, according to the way the story goes, I always love when they say that. Amru, they say, right? As if we don't really know what happened, but this is what they say. Lo zazu misham ad shaban vikisho vamet. They didn't leave from there, right? Meaning right away, what happened? A snake came, bit the murderer, and he died. Okay, now the Gemara asks the question. So that was a good, right? That was another case of circumstantial evidence, which is inadmissible in court. Although it is strange that he says the reason I can't do it is because we need Shnei Edim, but I think what he's saying is we need also witnesses, and this is not called witnesses. I didn't see this. So now what happens? The Gemara wants to know, why did he die by a snake bite? He should have died in some other way. Why is that? Well, hi Barnachashu, the Hamar of Yosef, Tana de Bechizkia. Okay, so this is Yosef said it. Some people say it was a braita from the house of Chizkiah. Or not some people said, but it's also a braita in the house of Chizkiah. Miyom shacharav beit hamikdash, af al pisha batla Sanhedrin, arba mito beitin lo batlu. From the time the temple was destroyed, even though there's no longer a Sanhedrin, now there was a Sanhedrin after, what they mean though, Sanhedrin that judges capital crimes, because they didn't do that anymore, but capital crimes were not canceled. Okay, mito beitim were not canceled. So that's like an oxymoron. It's saying the same, or a contradiction. Lo batlu, v'habatlu. What do you mean they weren't canceled? They were canceled. Well, eladin arba mitot lo batlu. The fact that there's a law about arba mitot is still in existence, meaning misha nitchayev skila, o nofel minagag, o chayad orasto. In other words, God arranges it that whoever's deserving of death, the arba mitot beitin are still there, just not as mitot beitin. They're now given to the hands of God, and God makes sure that whoever is deserving of death will get death. Now, we're going to learn later on the Masechet who gets skila, who gets streifa, who gets cherev, who gets chenek. Those are the 4 different ways of people dying. So now they're going to say, if you did, and this is going to be the problem with the snake, if you did a certain punishment that you're deserving of stoning, then what happens to you? Either you're going to fall from a roof or an animal is going to attack you. Now, why is that? What does have to do with stoning? So stoning, what they would do first, we're going to learn this, is they would throw you from the second story of a building. They would throw the person off. They would probably die from impact. And if not, either which way, they would put stone on him after. I think either which way, I don't know. We'll get there and we'll see. So this is very similar to falling from the roof. Okay, that's the way they would stone people. Or an animal attacking you is also kind of like being flung. If you're supposed to be die by burning, either you die in a fire, or the snake bites you because it's like a burning sensation. I think that's what they mean. Anyway, what do you see here? If you're chayav sreifa, that's what you would get. Now, killing a person gets you hereg, saif. That's by the sword, not sreifa. So that's why they asked the question, why by a snake bite? That's not the right death. So we'll get back to the answer soon, but let's continue. Mishnah is chayav hariga. If you're supposed to be killed by the sword, onim sar l'machut. Either you get the enemy king convicts you of something, and they would always off with your head. O listim ba'im alav, or armed robbers come and they also would stab you or chop off your head. Mishanit chayev chenek. If you're supposed to die by strangulation, o tovea b'nahar, either you drown because drowning kind of you choke on the way down. O met b'sranchi, or you're going to die with diphtheria, which also was a disease where the throat becomes constricted and you can't breathe. So back to our question, why did he die by a snake bite? To which they answer, he actually had another sin upon him. He had done something else. And it says, you get the more severe, and streif is more severe than hereg. Even according to all the opinions, there's some debates we're going to get to, but streifa and skila are definitely the top ones, the more severe, and hereg and chenek are the 2 bottom ones. There's just debate about what's the order within the 2, but that's for sure the more chamor one, and he must have done something else besides the fact that he killed this person. Okay, tough. Moving on. Me'omed. Now we're going to talk about circumstantial evidence. It's a topic of Alana Steinhain this week, which will go up sometime today. Very interesting topic about, where we draw the line on circumstantial evidence. We're going to see in the Gemara that it seems circumstantial evidence can be the beginning of, right now we're going to discuss, is it only a problem in Dinei Nefashot, but can you use it in Dinei Mamonot? And then just going to get into is also like, what's the reason? Why can we perhaps accept circumstantial evidence in Dinei Mamonot? And, what do we mean? Is there a range, like we talked about before? There's a range of, this was a pretty clear-cut case of circumstantial evidence. What if it's not as clear, where you draw the lines, what the reasoning behind this all? Anyway, with that, you can listen to Alana in Din and Daf. Me'omed. So, bedine nefashot hu delo amdinan. Ha bedine mamonot amdinan. Now, there's two ways to derive this. Some people derive it from the fact that in the Mishnah that talked about how we threaten, and then we had some different ways that the Gemara brought for how we threaten. We don't say anything about omed. Some people think it's just because it was specified specifically by nefashot, it sounds like it's only nefashot. Okay? So either which way they infer, it seems like din mamonot, you could do omdin. You could use circumstantial evidence. Kiman, kirabi acha. Okay, so Gita, you're pointing out the agunot. So yeah, also Alana talks about what if it's not mamonot, not nefasha. What if it's things like aguna and other things? She brings up also in her shir that topic. So that's why it's always good to go in depth and get more perspective than we get just from the stuff. Rabbi Acha. Okay, so now the Gemara says, if we assume from here, which is a question, can we make this assumption? But they're making an assumption that omdim you could use circumstantial evidence in dinim mamonot. If so, Kiman, it seems like it's Rabbi Acha. This must be according to Rabbi Acha, de Tanya. Rabbi Acha Omer, Rabbi Acha says, Gamal ha'ocher ben ha'gmalim. If a gamal is in heat, okay, in the mating season, and perhaps even in the act of mating, it's unclear exactly. V'nimtza gamal harug b'tzido, and you see another camel dead next to the camel. B'yadua shezeh harago. You can assume that gamal killed. Some people say it's because while they're engaging in relations, they kick. Some people just say that it's the Koran actually has a footnote that says that when camels are in heat, they potentially kill other males, like as I guess, get out of the way and, I'm in charge here. I don't want you getting in my way at all. Not sure, but apparently they say that they kill. I don't know enough about camels. Either which way, it seems pretty clear here. Okay, and again, goes back to the question, how clear is this? On the range of clear to not so clear. But if you see a camel killed right next to him, you assume this camel killed, and then again, the owner has to pay. Vilit amech, eid mipi eid katane. Well, according to what you're saying then, and this is a question, because eid mipi eid, what about hearsay? You heard some aid say it, and now you're saying it, right? Or, you heard some witness told you. Now, it's only mentioned here, right? Bedine nefashot hu delo amrinan, ha bedine mamonot amrinan. You're going to say you can bring that in a Dina Mamonot case, specifically because the whole idea was again, there were two ways we saw it, but let's just go with, it says it's specifically in Dina Nefashot, which sounds like it doesn't apply in Dina Mamonot. But what? Aid me P-Aid, you can do in Dina Mamonot? We already learned you can't do that. Remember? Bahatnan. Im amar hu amar li shani chayavlo. Right? The person himself said, I'm responsible. Or ish ploni amar lo shu chayavli. Somebody else told me that person owes money, that some other person owes money. Lo amar klum. That's aid me P-Aid. Doesn't work. So, ad shiomar b'fanenu hodalo shuchayav l'matayim zuz. Remember, you have to say, the person testified, admitted before me and said, I'm sending you to be my witnesses. Remember, and only then. So, ABPA doesn't work either, and yet it's only mentioned here and not in Dina Mamonot. Alma, afagav de psile b'dina mamonot, amrin alu b'dina nefashot. Hachanami, afagav de psile b'dina mamonot, amrin alu b'dina nefashot. So they say, even, right, that is also disqualified in Dina Mamonot. So you could say the same thing for Ondin. Also, maybe circumstantial evidence isn't accepted, and then we don't have to say we hold like Rabbi Acha. So there seems to be this deliberation, and it's not clear from here at all which one we hold by. This is just a discussion. They said it must be you hold like Rabbi Acha here. The Mishnah holds like Rabbi Acha because they don't say that by Dina Mamonot, but just because they don't say, or they only say it by Dina Nefashot as warning, they don't warn the witnesses in Dina Mamonot about this. But perhaps just because they don't warn them doesn't prove anything. So it could be circumstantial evidence is accepted in Dina Mamonot, it could be it isn't, which leads to a lack of clarity here. Hevu Yodim. Okay, now we're going to get off on a tangent. This will take us to the end of the daf on psukim about Kayin and Hevel. Since the Mishnah mentioned these psukim on Kayin and Hevel, Cain and Abel, we're going to go and darshan a bunch of things. So again, Hava Yodim, right? You should know. And then we said, right, that you're affecting not just this person, but you're affecting their tzetzaim, their future children, like we see by Demei Achecha. So now, Amar Rav Yehuda, we're going to have three different drashot from Cain and Hevel. Amar Rav Yehuda Bereid Rabbi Chia Melamed Cain Asa Cain beHevel Achiv Chaburot Chaburot Psiot Psiot. He stabbed him a lot of times. Okay, he kept stabbing here, stabbing there, injuring here, injuring there. Shelo haya yodea mehecha neshama yotzah. He didn't know how to kill a person. What is this midrash stressing? In case you didn't realize, but it's obvious. But that there wasn't death in the world before. He had no idea how even to kill him. So he kept trying. Oh, maybe if I poke him here, he'll die. Maybe if I poke him there, he'll die. And he tried many times. This is probably a drasha also on the Demei Achecha. Why was there so much blood all over the place? Because he stabbed him all over. A little violent, a little vicious, this whole midrash. Ad shigil tzavaro, until he finally got to the neck, and then he realized that's the way to kill a person. I think what part of it is also maybe highlighting how something that's so basic to us, because I mean, unfortunately, we don't generally, we're not involved in killing, but we know how you would kill somebody, and we're so immune to this idea that we don't even notice, right? And to think about that, there was someone who didn't even know how to do this, right? It shows how bad the world has become. That it's just something like murder has just become known and obvious to everyone. Now I see you're asking. I wanted to point this out also. It's a little bit strange, this midrash, because they did kill animals, so it's hard to imagine that they didn't know how to kill, right? Maybe they differentiated. They didn't realize animals and humans were going to be the same in this way. It's a question. But again, whether this is a real midrash, this isn't exactly what happened. So that question is not really a question, because what this is trying to highlight is how new murder was to the world, and how something that is just normal now and normalized, again, not normalized to the fact that we say murder is good, but everybody knows how to murder somebody, but it was just not known then, and that kind of ruined it for everybody, right? That was the first murder in the Torah. So again, it's obvious the first murder in the Torah, but this midrash is making it even more visually, in a very kind of graphic way. But Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bereid to Rabbi Chia, another drasha he says about Cain and Hevel. Miyom shepatcha haaretz et pia v'kibalto l'damoshel Hevel shuv lo patcha. Okay, it says there that in the pasuk it says the earth opened up and swallowed the blood. We're going to get to Korach, don't worry. You're thinking about it. So it's the only time the world opened up its mouth, okay, and swallowed the blood. Shneimar, how do we know this? Because it said miknaf haaretz mirot shamanu tzvila tzaddik. Okay, it says here from the edge of the earth we heard this singing, and that means miknaf haaretz v'lo mipi haaretz. We didn't hear it from inside; we only heard it from the edge, from the surface. So Chizkiah's brother says to him, "What are you talking about?" By Korach, the world, the ground opened up. No, I meant the ground never opened for good things. Why is this for good things? It was a murder. What do you mean for good things? No, but the idea was either to cover up Cain and what he did, which I don't know that you would call that good, or it could be to have Hevel properly buried. So the earth opened up and kind of buried. It's almost like the first burial in the Torah happened naturally. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bereid Rabbi Chia, the third thing he says, they're all by the same person, by the way. Galut mechaperet avon mechza. Okay, galut, exile, atones halfway for a sin. Okay, for half of the sin. Mikarkti vayita na v'nad. It says about Cain, you're going to be na v'nad. Now I looked up in the BDB. That's the best Bible dictionary from an academic perspective. So nad means driven, because na v'nad usually you just say it was a wandering. What does it mean exactly? So nad is driven away, and na is wandering. So in the end, right, he was supposed to be both driven away, that's exile, and also wandering from place to place. But in the end, what happens? Now notice nod is like nad. He goes to Eretz Nod, which is an exiled place, but the wandering doesn't happen anymore. He actually ends up settling. So what happens is once he goes into exile, that's atoned for half a sin, and the nad doesn't have to happen anymore, the wandering. Amar Rav Yehuda, he says, Galut mechaperet shlosha dvarim. So now he says, if we're talking about galut, what it atones for, okay, one said half of the sins. Now it says, or half of a sin. Now it says it atones for three things. Shenemar Komar Hashem Yoshe Ba'irahu Hazot Yamut Becherev Berav B'Dever. Okay, you're going to die by the sword, by famine, and by plague. By Yotzei V'Nafal Akastim Atzarim Alehem B'Chaya. If you go out though to the Babylonians and you give in to them, you surrender to them and go into exile, V'Chaya, you will survive. Okay, V'Aitalo Nafsho L'Shala. I'm not going to explain the end of that pasuk. Let's just go on. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Galu mechaperet ala kol shene'emal. Forget that. It's not just half an avon. It's not just three things. It's right. The three things being the dever, the cherev, and the rav. Gever galu mechaperet on everything. Shene'emal. Kol amar Hashem kitvu et haish hazeh hariri gever leitzlach b'yamav. This is about Yechonya. He was one of the last kings of Yehuda, one of the later kings who ends up going into exile early. There's like an earlier exile of the kings of Judea, and he goes into exile early. And it says about him, you're going to be ariri, no children. Gever leitzlach b'yamav. You won't have any other children who are going to be kings. So now what happens? After he goes to exile, we're going to see he was atoned for. The sons of Yechonya are, now they're going to say it's not really plural sons, it's all one. Asir Shaltiel, okay, that was his name. Asir, why Asir? Yechonya was in jail when she became pregnant with him. So she was able to get pregnant even though he was in jail. Shaltiel, why was his name Shaltiel? Sheshatlo el shalo kederach hanishtalim. He was planted. God planted him in, meaning the mother conceived in a very atypical manner. There's a tradition that a woman can, if she has relations while she's standing, she can't get pregnant. And she did. Why was she standing? Because he was in jail and the jail cell was too small. And they allowed her to come into jail to have relations with him, but they had to stand because there was no space. And that was the miracle that happened. So what do you see? First of all, he had children. And who was his child? Shaltiel, right? And what happened after? Right, first of all, he had a child after this happened because he was in jail. And Shaltiel was the father of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, okay, we're going to see Zerubbabel, which is known as Nehemiah. See that in tomorrow's daf. We'll get there in a minute. But at the very beginning of tomorrow's daf, in the end, right, Zerubbabel is the child and he becomes a manhig. So also the Beit David. Okay, so with that, we end our daf. We talked about the tzura of the Sanhedrin, how they sat, how the rows of the students, how they all moved. Then we got to the source for the semicircle, and from that we got into that whole pasuk in Shir haShirim, which we darshan very extensively about the amazingness, the awesomeness of the Sanhedrin and the Jewish people. From there, we got to the new Mishnah about how do we threaten the witnesses in Dinei Nefashot with all sorts of interesting statements and tangents about the value of life, about Cain and Hevel. And from there, we got to the issue of circumstantial evidence. We talked about that. We talked about the difference between circumstantial evidence in Dinei Mamona and Dinei Nefashot. And then we got back to drashot on Cain and Hevel. And with that, we finished for today. Wishing everyone a good day.